A ground invasion of Iran ends in disaster. I'm going to give you 6 reasons why, and each one alone is enough to kill the entire operation before it starts. Together, they make this the worst military decision in modern American history. And here's what makes this undeniable. The Pentagon already knows. There have been multiple classified war game simulations of a U.S. ground invasion of Iran, and we know about them because former officials have spoken publicly after leaving government. Here's what's remarkable about every single one of those simulations. They all end the same way. American forces bogged down, supply lines cut, regional escalation spiraling out of control, and the US searching for an exit that doesn't exist. Different variables, different commanders, different political scenarios, same outcome every time, okay? When your own war planners keep losing the same war, that tells you everything. So let's talk about exactly why. And by the time we get to reason 6, you're going to understand why even the people pushing for this war know it can't be won. Stay with me. Iran watched the Gulf War in 1991. They watched the shock and awe campaign dismantle a conventional Arab military in weeks. And they made a decision. They said, "We will never fight America that way. We will never line up tanks in the desert and let their air force destroy us from the sky. We will build something different, okay?" And for the next 30 years, that's exactly what they did. They built an asymmetric military architecture specifically engineered around one scenario: the day America tries to come in on the ground. What does that look like in practice? Underground missile storage facilities buried so deep that conventional bunker busters can't reliably reach them. A network of tunnels throughout the Zagros Mountains connecting defensive positions that took decades to construct. Drone production facilities dispersed across the country so that destroying one doesn't collapse the program. Proxy forces, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militia groups, pre-positioned across the region with weapons already in place, already integrated into Iranian command structure, ready to activate the moment an invasion begins. Iran didn't build an army to defeat America. They built a system to make America defeat itself. Okay? And that distinction is everything. Stop. Before we talk about mountains and passes and terrain, I want you to pull up Google Maps right now and look at Iran. Just look at it. Look at the size. Look at what surrounds it, because no amount of explanation does what 30 seconds of looking at that map does, okay? Now let's talk about what you're actually looking at. There's a reason every serious military analyst goes quiet when you ask them about a land invasion of Iran. It's not political, it's not ideological, it's the map. To the west, the Zagros mountain range, continuous peaks, some above 4,000 meters, running the entire length of the border. To the north, the Elburz Range, which includes Mount Damavand at 5,610 meters, the highest volcano in Asia. To the east, the Dasht-e Kavir and Dasht-e Lut, 2 of the most inhospitable desert plateaus on the planet, where summer surface temperatures have been recorded above 70 degrees Celsius. Iran is not a country you can outflank. The geography closes every door except one, straight through the Western Mountain Corridor. And that corridor is exactly where Iran has been building its defenses for 30 years. The main passes through the Zagros, the Paytak Pass, the main road axes, are separated by ridgelines and river valleys that create natural compartments. Each compartment is effectively its own isolated battlefield. An armored column moving through any of these passes has high ground on both sides, limited room to maneuver, and no ability to receive reinforcement quickly if it gets hit. You can't push around an ambush. You can't find an alternate route in real time. You absorb the hit, deal with the casualties, clear the position if you can, and then do it again 10 kilometers down the road, okay? That's not a campaign. That's a grinding attrition battle at the end of a supply line that gets longer and more exposed every single day. And here's what makes the mountain problem even worse: the weather. The Zagros region experiences brutal winters, with heavy snowfall closing passes from November through March. The operational window for a major mechanized push is actually quite narrow, roughly late spring through early autumn, and even within that window, flash flooding can render roads impassable for days at a time. Napoleon in Russia, the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad. The weather doesn't care about your operational schedule, okay? There's also the urban dimension that people aren't thinking about. The Western Iranian cities, Kermanshah, Ahvaz, Ilam, sit directly in or near the mountain approaches. Ahvaz alone has over 1 million people and sits in Khuzestan province, which holds the majority of Iran's oil infrastructure. If American forces try to bypass these cities, they leave hostile population centers on their flanks and supply lines. If they try to take them, they're fighting urban warfare simultaneously with mountain warfare. Fallujah in 2004 required roughly 10,000 coalition troops to clear a city of 300,000. Ahvaz has 3 times that population. Mosul in 2016 took 9 months. Military planners call it culmination, the point where an attacking force runs out of combat power before it reaches its objective. In Iran's western corridor, culmination happens fast. And here's the piece that ties all of this together. Iran doesn't need to hold every piece of ground. Their strategic goal is simply to make the cost of advancing unacceptable, because America's real vulnerability isn't military, it's time. America needs a quick, visible result to maintain domestic support. Iran needs to deny that result long enough for public opinion to turn. The mountain terrain buys Iran exactly that time. Alexander the Great understood this problem in Persia. The British Empire understood it. The Soviet Union understood it in Afghanistan. The question is whether Washington has absorbed that lesson or whether it has to be learned again from scratch. And we haven't even gotten to the economic weapon yet, because that's where it gets truly catastrophic. Here's the part that nobody on television is explaining. Forget the soldiers for a second. Forget the missiles. Iran has a weapon that doesn't fire a single shot. And it could collapse the American economy within weeks of an invasion starting. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Through it passes approximately 20% of the world's entire oil supply every single day. Iran has spent decades developing the ability to threaten that strait. Mines, shore-based anti-ship missiles, submarines, and fast attack boat swarms. They don't need to permanently close it. They just need to make insurers unwilling to cover tankers passing through it. When insurers stop covering tankers, tankers stop moving. When tankers stop moving, oil prices don't gradually rise. They spike. The IMF, the Energy Information Administration, and financial institutions worldwide have modeled this scenario extensively. A sustained Hormuz disruption is one of the few events capable of triggering a genuine global recession within weeks. The same American public whose political support is required to sustain a ground campaign in Iran would simultaneously be paying $6 per gallon of gasoline and watching their retirement accounts collapse. The economic and political pressures don't operate on separate tracks. They compound each other in real time, accelerating the collapse of domestic support for a war that is already fighting uphill. So, you have impossible terrain, a collapsing supply chain, and an economic weapon pointed at global oil markets. You think that's enough? It's not. Because we haven't talked about what happens on day 2, when Iran doesn't fight back alone. People think of a US-Iran war as bilateral, America versus Iran. But that's not the architecture Iran has built. Okay, Hezbollah in Lebanon has over 150,000 rockets and missiles, more than most European militaries. including precision-guided munitions capable of hitting specific infrastructure targets inside Israel. The Houthis in Yemen have already demonstrated repeatedly that they can disrupt Red Sea shipping and strike targets across the Arabian Peninsula. Iraqi Shia militia groups maintain established command relationships with Tehran. Iranian-aligned forces are positioned throughout Syria. This network doesn't wait for instructions once an invasion begins. It activates simultaneously against pre-assigned target sets across every theater at once. American bases throughout the Middle East come under missile and drone attack on day one. Shipping lanes are disrupted. Gulf state oil infrastructure becomes a target. The conflict doesn't stay inside Iran's borders. It spreads across the entire region faster than any response can contain it. Military planners call this the Day 2 problem, what the operational picture looks like after the initial exchange, when 5 separate fronts have opened simultaneously and none of them were the main effort. There is no clean answer to that question. There is not supposed to be. Iran designed it that way. I'm going to give you 2 numbers. 20 years, 11 days. Remember those, because they tell you everything you need to know about what comes next. America spent 20 years in Afghanistan, over $2 trillion, built an army and a government, and an entire institutional structure. And it lasted about 11 days after the withdrawal decision was made. Everything gone in 11 days. America spent nearly 9 years in Iraq after the initial invasion, lost over 4,400 soldiers, spent another $2 trillion, and the strategic outcome was that Iran gained more regional influence than it had before. Think about that. America fought a war against Iranian regional influence, and Iran came out of it stronger. Okay? These aren't ancient history. They are the lived experience of the officers currently commanding American forces, the soldiers who would be asked to fight, and the voters whose political support would determine how long any campaign could continue. The credibility required to sustain public support for another major ground campaign in the region, the credibility that existed, however briefly, in 2003, does not exist in the same form today. Congressional representatives from districts with large military family populations will do the political math quickly when the casualty reports start. The question isn't whether political support collapses, it's how fast. And in Iran, the answer is faster than any previous conflict. 5 reasons down. Every single one of them is enough to end this conversation. But reason 6 is different. It's not about military capability or terrain or economics. It's about a question that nobody in Washington can answer. Every serious strategic analysis of an Iran ground invasion eventually arrives at the same fundamental problem. And it is not a military problem. It is a definitional one. What does victory look like? How is it defined? How is it achieved? And how is it sustained? Removing a government is not victory. The United States removed Saddam Hussein's government in 3 weeks. What followed consumed the next 20 years. Iran's government, whatever its internal tensions, sits atop a Persian national identity that is ancient, coherent, and historically resistant to foreign occupation, including among Iranians who oppose the current political system. Polling and reporting from within Iran consistently show that opposition to the Islamic Republic does not translate into welcoming an American military presence. You can degrade Iran's military. You can take territory. You cannot hold it, administer it, or build anything durable without a force commitment that doesn't exist and a political will the historical record suggests cannot be maintained. And when withdrawal eventually comes, as it came from Vietnam, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, everything collapses behind the departing force with a speed that is, By now, entirely predictable. Here's what I want you to sit with. This isn't a situation where smart people disagree. The Pentagon's own war planners ran the simulation, not once, not twice, and kept arriving at the same place. So, when you hear confident talk about what a campaign against Iran looks like, ask yourself, if the people planning it already know how it ends, what exactly are we doing? The Pentagon's simulations don't keep ending in failure because American soldiers aren't skilled or brave. They are. They end in failure because the problems are structural, embedded in the geography, the mathematics of force requirements, the architecture of Iran's asymmetric preparation, and the absence of any achievable definition of success. Iran has spent 30 years engineering a situation where American strengths are neutralized and American vulnerabilities are systematically exploited. The mountain terrain that eliminates armor's advantage. The proxy network that forces engagement on 5 fronts simultaneously. The economic weapon that turns the war's cost into a domestic political crisis. The dispersed infrastructure that absorbs airstrikes without collapsing. None of this is improvised. It is doctrine, refined over decades, designed around one operational objective. Make the cost of invasion higher than any American administration can sustain. That is the strategic reality. The intelligence community understands it. The military leadership understands it. A significant portion of the political establishment understands it. The war games have demonstrated it repeatedly with results that don't change regardless of how the variables are adjusted. What happens next depends entirely on whether the people with the authority to make this decision are willing to look at that evidence honestly and what they choose to do with it. Okay? We're going to keep watching this. We're going to keep breaking it down as it develops, because understanding what's actually happening, not the version you're getting on television, is the only way to have a real conversation about what comes next.